Mafia stories have always been a personal favorite of mine. It goes back a few years because they were always fan favorites of my parents, especially my mother, because she loved films like The Godfather, Goodfellas, and all that, and that sort of transferred to me when I got older. I say older because I watched things like The Godfather when I was too young, like we all did when we were younger. We used to watch things that were probably wildly inappropriate for our age, but hey ho. That influence transferred to video games and, of course, into the industry with here with the Mafia series. I remember playing the first Mafia a long time ago on the PlayStation 2, which is regarded not the best port of the game. I didn't really get into the Mafia franchise until Mafia 2, which is still widely regarded as the best in the franchise. And I would wholeheartedly agree, but that doesn't change the fact that this game's still really, really, really good. Um, had a bit of a stumbling block the series with Mafia 3, with its, let's just say, uh, turbulent release. Um, and it just wasn't great. It was very buggy. They went the whole route of it being a sandbox Grand Theft Auto clone, and it just doesn't work for this specific franchise. Whereas they corrected themselves with the remake of the first game in 2020 with Mafia the Definitive Edition. And of course, fast forward to 2025, here we are with Mafia the Old Country, where they go all the way back to the early 20th century, the early 1900s, where we are in Sicily. It's the birthplace of the mafia. And honestly, I think it's fantastic. A lot of people gave it a bit of flack when it came out because I think people kind of misunderstood the assignment of this game, thinking it was going to be a GTA style sort of game, which is just not the case at all. Mafia has always been a linear game with an in-depth narrative, with an open world as more set dressing as opposed to being a playground as sorts, which is where I think people are getting confused with this franchise still to this day. And yeah, Mafia the Old Country, in short, it's really, really good. Obviously, takes influence from various mob media throughout the almost 100 years at this point, if we're going by the original Scarface, which was released in the 1930s. Um, but it takes more specifically from Mario Puzo's The Sicilian, which, if you recognize that author's name, he wrote the deeply influential The Godfather in 1969, which eventually got a film adaptation in 1972. But it takes more from The Sicilian because obviously The Sicilian is based in the early 20th century of the mafia in Sicily, that sort of thing, and goes over the sort of like how it sort of establishes how the mob had their early start within this era. But yeah, we'll get into the gameplay, the narrative, and all that. So let's do that as we go, shall we? And yes, as you can tell, I'm dressed up for the occasion because I thought, why not dress up and pretend to be a mobster in a video about a mafia game? I thought it'd be a bit of fun, to be honest. And yeah, you get to see me in some smart attire for once instead of me looking like a slob in my hoodie or t-shirt or pajamas. Yeah, I'm actually well dressed for once. So let's get into it, shall we? So Mafia the Old Country takes place. It starts off in 1904, and you play as Enzo, who is a miner for a sulfur mine, which is controlled by the one of the mafia families in the island of Sicily, specifically the Spadados. And he's been doing it for years, and he doesn't see any way out of it until uh, recent events unfold, where him and his friend are mining, and his friend wants to go to Empire Bay to America to escape the grip of the mob from Sicily. I know, haha, when they all transfer to that part of the world anyway. But things go wrong. The sulfur mine has a gas leak. Things start to explode and collapse. But the don of the Spadaro family is not having any of it, and he wants them all to go back to work and get on with it. And Enzo not really having any of it really anymore. He can't take anymore with all the danger, with the lack of pay or very little pay. Um, he runs away and he gets shot at and he ends up on the Torrisi family turf, who end up taking him in because he's on their land, and he ends up taking him in because basically he wants to put one on the Spadaro family. Basically, he Enzo starts off as a stable hand for the Torrisi family, and slowly works his way up the sort of ranks of the mob, where he starts doing a job. He protects the Don's daughter, and he sees the potential in Enzo. It's pretty standard, stock standard stuff in a mob story where you start off like it's a rags to riches story basically, where Enzo is like in the gutter, not doing a particularly glamorous job, but he ends up sort of going through the ranks, of the mafia, and betrayals, twists, that sort of thing happen. None of these Mafia games have particularly happy endings. I think there might be with Mafia 3, but that's an optional ending. In general, these games have pretty bleak endings, just basically the sort of like stereotypical story of how crime doesn't pay, of course, because eventually it's all going to catch up with you, whether it be the authorities or you want to get out and the family doesn't want you to get out of the business, as it were. But the story is quite sort of by the numbers. It has some twists and turns. What saves it is the voice acting. I played it in English dub, which they have like Italian accents, but the Italian accents, they don't come across as sort of stereotypical, as it were, or like sort of like you would expect in other forms of media. You can play it in Sicilian if you want to, and by the way, don't call a Sicilian Italian; they will take offence to it. Um, but the English dub is really good. They'll speak English most of the time, but here and there they will quite often veer off and I don't know, swear in their dialect, in their native dialect, not too dissimilar what they do in like Assassin's Creed 2, that sort of thing in Italy and all that, or in Sleeping Dogs, because Sleeping Dogs obviously is English Cantonese, so they'll swear in Cantonese or whatever. But anyway, they will do that here and there, but all the dialogue is in English in the dub. But it does a really good job. The accents are authentic, and I think what helps is that they actually hired Sicilian Italian actors to do this game, which adds to the authenticity of the dialogue. And speaking of the dialogue, the voice acting is superb. The performances are superb. Don Torrisi, the actor that plays him, he's sort of like your classic sort of. He's basically Don Vito Corleone from The Godfather with his sort of like gravelly voice.
And what does this have to do with me?
Corrado Bastone, his brother, led the police to my door. He broke omerta and stole from me.
This is a serious accusation. Who make this claim?
Enzo Favara and Cesare Massaro.
Caruso, the half-wheat.
They're both trusted men.
That wretch Bastone colluded with the law. I demand that this be made right.
That's probably bridging onto a stereotype, but it works, and he's quite an intimidating person. Comes across as kind to begin with, but there are scenes where he's sort of genuinely terrifying, and you're just kind of like sat in your seat like, whoa. But yeah, all the actors across the board are excellent. They do a great job of selling you the illusion that they're mafioso gangsters. And Enzo does a good job too. He kind of comes across as naive to begin with, but as he sort of learns about the business, he becomes more of a cold-blooded killer, and he starts to become more and more intimidating. But at the same time, he still has a sense of empathy and humanity in him, because sometimes he doesn't want to kill people, he doesn't want to shoot people, that sort of thing. And it's just done so well, his character arc, and also his relationship with the Don's daughter, which again, it's another trope in the mafioso sort of narrative sort of space, but it works because the chemistry between the Don's daughter Isabella and Enzo is just so well done between the two actors that play them. And overall, just the story is just really interesting, which in any mafia game is what you're here for, from like beginning to end credits to end credits. It has you engaged. All the characters are good. Like a few, like there's one like character who's in the other Mafia games, Leo Galante. He's in it as a young man, which I thought was a nice nod. I don't think any other Mafia characters that were in like Mafia 1 and 2 are in it as young people in their native homeland. But overall, it's just a very good story, and will keep you going. But in terms of the gameplay, which I'll get into in a minute, it's your stock standard fare. So let's just get into it, shall we? So gameplay in this game is, as I had mentioned earlier, quite stock standard affair. It feels like I've gone back in time a bit to like the Xbox 360 era, like where there was a myriad of cover-based shooters where you take cover, you pop out, and you shoot. And some would probably call it uninspired, but I would say it just serves its purpose. Because what else were you possibly looking for in a game like this in the Mafia? You're going to be shooting a lot of people, although you don't shoot that many people in this game, to be honest, because given its time period where ammunition was quite scarce and guns were fairly unreliable during this period too, you don't shoot people that often. What the selling point of this game with the combat is the one-on-one knife fights, and yeah, they work. They're quite fun. They're sort of like They're not particularly in depth, they're not particularly hard, but they're flashy, they're over the top, and it's something you would expect from a that sort of a old school mafioso with the butterfly knives you flip out and then you just go one on one. It's that sort of thing about Men of Honor, that sort of romanticism of the old mafia, where it's like you have to look me in the eye when you kill me, that sort of thing, and it fits the thematically perfect with this game, with the whole sort of one-on-one macho um, attitude that the mob had back then, where they expected you to fight, not fight dirty. It's like look me in the eye when you're going to take me on and not stab me in the back. And yeah, they're fun. They're not particularly difficult. You can deflect, you can parry, you can dodge, slash, thrust, that sort of thing. They basically serve as the boss fights for the games when you fight like the main sort of like henchmen of the enemy family or leaders of each of the family and all that. Yeah, they work. They work really well story wise too, because obviously when everyone's been wiped out in a gunfight and it's just you and him, and you just want to take each other on in a sort of like cinematic fight, as it were. I heard people kind of bash this mechanic because it's used too often, and I just think, well, of course it's used too often because, as I mentioned at the start of this section, guns were unreliable in this time period. Bullets were finite in this period too, so they didn't often want to expend bullets and waste them on like one person. So okay, it's probably a bit more exertion from that person to take them on one with a knife fight, but of that they wouldn't waste resources doing it. Um, there are stealth elements too in this game. They do want you to stealth a fair bit in this game, I found, but it's not a bad thing because other times it's optional to be stealthy. You can just go all guns blazing, but there are quite a few stealth sections where it's mandatory to go stealth, which can be irritating. But honestly, these stealth mechanics again are pretty basic. You can choke enemies out or stab them in the back, but the caveat of that with the stab them in the back is the butterfly knife in stealth has degradation. So depending what knife you use, you can get knives with better degradation. So they have which are represented by like tiny bars on the screen underneath it. So you can pick up whetstones off of enemies where you can sharpen your knife, and these are limited and finite in each section. And yeah, it's interesting. It kind of like makes you more cautious about when to use a knife or not to use a knife, because also the butterfly knife is to open specific boxes to find collectibles, currency to buy new guns, and customization for your car, that sort of thing. And yeah, it adds a bit of choice to these sections. Whereas in most other games where it's like, oh, you can play it however you want to with stealth, and you can just stab people with no repercussions really. Where in this one, it feels like there's a sense of survival and urgency because choking out, you only have like a certain amount of time to tap the square button to choke them out because there'll be like a little timer underneath until they can ungrapple from you and basically take you down. I like it. It breaks up the gameplay instead of just being constantly sitting behind cover and shooting people because that can be get pretty monotonous. Speaking of the shooting, it feels pretty good. It feels wavery and inaccurate, but that may sound like a bad thing, by the way. But it's done on purpose because Enzo, he's not a soldier. He's never used a gun before properly, and it makes sense that he can't shoot pinpoint accurate like shooting someone on the other side of the room right in between the eyes because of course he can't because he's never used a gun before. And as I've said before, these guns are very early sort of like semi-automatic weapons, so they're not prone to be accurate, and some of them you have to load one bullet at a time. They're old timey weapons, so in a sense they feel thematically crappy, to put it in such crass terms. So of course they feel a bit more cumbersome. They don't feel as accurate because they were very sort of like early modern weapons, as it were, at the time, because it's all bolt action. Couple of semi-automatic pistols, but again, they're obviously going to feel a bit inaccurate because they're very early incarnations of the semi-automatic pistol. Because it's too early for the 1911, of course, because it goes from 1904 to 1908, I believe the story stretches to. So you're not going to have like all the modern pistols you expect. So it makes you take your time with your shots because there is quite a bit of bloom when you fire your weapons, even from cover. And of course, I always carry a shotgun on me, the Lapora specifically, because obviously enemies will start to charge your position. It's not like you just sit there for ages and just keep popping out and and keep killing enemies from like one bit of cover. They will throw explosives at you to get you out of cover. The guys with shotguns will kind of flank you around, that sort of thing, and it just adds a bit more tension to the situation. Also, you die very easily in this game, even on normal. You can only take a handful of shots. I dread to think what this game is going to be like on hard because I've kind of contemplated getting the platinum for this game. But anyway, it's quite difficult in the latter half of the game because there's quite an overwhelming amount of enemies. But overall, the gameplay feels good. The driving, of course, it being early 20th century, cars were limited, although I'd say there's a bit too many cars for this time period because 1904. You do ride on horseback, which is what majority of people would have done back then because cars were quite an expensive commodity during that period. But of course, you do get the old-fashioned cars, the sort of early cars, where it's like you have to hand crank them to start them, and if you break them too much in crashes, you have to get out and crank them again to start them again. It's a nice historical touch, and I really like it, and it's absolutely fantastic. But that's the gameplay. Let's get to presentation stuff. Presentation wise, yeah, it's good, really good. Runs on Unreal Engine 5, and I know that engine gets quite a lot of flack these days for very good reasons because most of the time when a game runs on Unreal Engine 5, it tends to be a bit of a stuttery mess, popping and all sorts. And a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games tend to look quite samey, sort of in a way they look like those AI sort of asset flips you would see of like fan-made remakes of certain games. But this game, it kind of avoids that sort of trope of the Unreal Engine 5. It runs fine. I ran it in quality mode because the game does run pretty smoothly at performance. But what kind of pulled me out at the moment with it was when you go into a cutscene, it drops to 30 FPS. So I thought, screw it, I put it in quality mode because honestly, this is the sort of game that you don't really need that sort of performance boost with. And yeah, it just works in quality mode, and I didn't mind it because I'm not really bothered about 30 or 60 FPS. Obviously, 60 FPS is better, but 30 FPS is not going to break my immersion because it works either side with the cutscenes and the gameplay. Um, Character models look fantastic. You can see all the different details during the cutscenes, and you can see like the twitches, like the subtle eyebrow movements, the eye movement too, which is something that a lot of modern games seem to get wrong these days. Outside of like Death Stranding, which I talked about on Instagram earlier this year, Death Stranding got the eye movement right of like eye contact. This game also gets it right. That's the main thing about games when you're trying to convey a convincing story with the visuals, they need to complement the story. So eye contact, eyes in general in games is something that a lot of developers still don't get right. And that's something you need to have like convincing performances and overall, it's just sort of like advice in real life, really. Eye contact, but eye movement, eye contact is something to convey like emotions convincingly, and they get it right in this game in general. And also presentation of the world in general just looks fantastic. The sweeping landscapes of Sicily look amazing. You see the lavender fields, you see the olive orchards, the vineyards stretching out across the horizon. It has a very warm feeling to it, and it's absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love it. It's just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful game to explore in general. And ignore those notifications. Sorry, I forgot to turn myself on to busy. But yeah, in general, it's just a great, great, convincing experience within the time period because all the details are right, the guns are right, the clothing's right, the vehicles, how people got around is right, and just the culture and the culture, overall culture that they've depicted in this game is just absolutely fantastic, and it just shows that Hangar 13, they've done their research into this time period. That's the one thing I would applaud them about Mafia 3. They really did their research into the time period, and in that game they went into some very uncomfortable history of the United States. Where the same here, they went to some uncomfortable stuff with the Italian government and Sicily in general. It's just brilliant, absolutely fantastic. The presentation and just the attention to detail, and it's just one of those games I will replay in the future. And I feel like I'm looking to my shelf there. I want to replay the other Mafia games again because it's been so long. It's just nice to play a game that's pretty linear. It took me about 10 hours to finish and doesn't waste my time. It gives me a really good, concise gameplay and story loop, and just doesn't waste my time with 30, 40, 50, 80 hours worth of gameplay just to kind of prove that I've got my money's worth, as it were. Whereas this game wasn't charging full price, even though I bought this secondhand for 35 quid with CEX voucher. I probably would have paid like 30 quid actual cash for it because it's that good. But yeah, presentation wise and overall thoughts of Mafia the Old Country, it's just a brilliant game. If you're looking for like a really good linear, engaging narrative in a video game, you can't go wrong with this game. It's just very good. Not that expensive at the moment. You can buy it for like 30 quid, 35. At the time of recording, it's during like the Black Friday deal, so I think you get like £27 brand new in Smiths. And yeah, I just wish more developers would just go back to the drawing board from this era of gaming where you just gave us pretty good linear stories with engaging gameplay. We don't need these massive open world games. I think everyone can agree that we're kind of tired of these massive open world games where we're not engaging with the world but going down a checklist, and it's just very laborious these days. And yeah, Mafia the Old Country, I highly recommend it if you're a fan of mafioso sort of narratives, or even if you're not, you're just looking for a good story to engage with in a video game. Big recommendation from me. And yeah, I'll see you later. Big thank you for watching my video, guys. Sorry I've been gone for a bit on YouTube. As I said in my post on YouTube, I've been away with my partner in Essex. We went and did some shopping, that sort of thing. But just thank you for the support still for my YouTube channel. I'm enjoying doing this. It was quite a lot of fun just to dress up and talk about this game. I do like to do a bit of theatrics with my videos sometimes. Nothing flashy, just like things like this. It's just a lot of fun. Thank you again for supporting my video. Remember to like, subscribe, and all the other sort of buzzwords we use on YouTube. And I'll see you all later. See you later. Bye.